Welcome to Learning to Glow, a show about wellness, skin health, and self-development. I'm your host, Jess. I'm a mom, entrepreneur, and skincare expert. I'm so excited to share tips on how to achieve healthy skin and bring amazing guests in the field of health, fitness, aging gracefully, and personal growth. Let's explore all different ways we can take care of ourselves as women, both inside and out, to truly shine. So let's get glowing. Hello, everyone. I am so happy that you're here today. I absolutely love today's episode with Dr. Ashley Smith. This is one of my favorite episodes because she left us with so many tangible tips, and this can really help with our mindset, our outlook. It is amazing. So I know you're going to love this one. Dr. Ashley Smith is a licensed psychologist. She's the co-founder of Peak Mind, the Center for Psychological Strength, speaker, and author of The Way I See It, A Psychologist's Guide to a Happier Life. I'm actually going to be purchasing this book right away because it just sounds amazing, and I will make sure to link her book in the show notes as well. She's a sought-after anxiety expert, which we talked about in today's episode, and an outspoken advocate dedicated to changing the way we approach mental health and well-being. Dr. Ashley is also open about learning to thrive with a rare visual impairment. The combination of her professional expertise and personal experiences put her in a unique position to educate and inspire. She is passionate about helping others live bold, happy lives while performing at their peak. We talked about her visual impairment today and how she was able to get out of despair and move forward in her life in such a happy way. She talked about happiness in general and how to achieve a happy life. The way she talks about difficult emotions and anxiety is some of the most helpful that I've been yet to hear. And a lot of this information is just amazing. We can take these tools that she shared with us and use them in our life. I hope you enjoyed Dr. Ashley Smith's episode as much as I do. As you can tell, I really enjoyed it. And please share this with someone who could use these tools in their life. Please leave us a review, as that helps us get the word out for our show. I appreciate you all for being here, and enjoy this one. Hello, everyone. We have Dr. Ashley Smith. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here today.
I'm so excited to have you, and I'm so excited about our topics of the day. You're a therapist, you're a speaker, you're an author, and if we could start by, if you could introduce yourself, what you do, and then we'll go from there, and lots of fun things to talk about today.
Sounds great. So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. So I have a PhD in clinical psychology, and I specialize in anxiety and stress-related conditions. So what that means, I have a small private practice where I work one-on-one with people, helping them understand anxiety and what's going on in our brains and how to overcome that. The way I see it is so that you can live a bold, happy life. And I certainly practice what I preach. So on the sort of my journey, I've been doing clinical work for a long time. And maybe 10 years ago, I hit a really low point personally. So I also have a really rare degenerative retinal condition that makes me legally and increasingly blind. And for a really long time, I was able to mask it. I could fake sight pretty well. So most people close to me didn't even know the extent of it. But about 10 years ago, my vision loss progressed to the point where I couldn't drive anymore. And that for me was a devastating blow. I hit this point where I was really honestly scared and sad and stuck. I was pretty convinced I wouldn't be able to do the things that I wanted to do or live the life that I wanted to live. I thought it was going to limit me personally and professionally. And so I kind of wallowed for a little bit. I didn't know what else to do. And at some point, I got tired of being stuck and tired of being scared. And I did what I do best, which is be a giant nerd. And I dove into science, and specifically the science of happiness. So my background is anxiety. I practice all of those skills, and it just wasn't enough. So then I looked to happiness and how do we build that, and how do we cultivate a good life experience? And that got me onto this journey of entrepreneurship, becoming a speaker, and a writer, and really trying to take the things that I know from psychology, from applied neuroscience, we can just call it brain science, and what we know about happiness and living a good life and overcoming adversity. And for me, it's been fantastic. I'm at a point, my vision is the worst that it's ever been. There's no treatment options or cure, and I don't know how much I will lose or how bad it'll get, but I'm happy and I'm doing really cool things that I'm excited about personally and professionally. And I want that same thing for other people. So that's me in a very long winded nutshell.
I know some people who have been dealing with problems with their eyes,
Mhm.
issues that are causing major vision issues, and that is super scary until you actually go through something that serious. Do you realize that you take for granted, first of all, but
Yeah.
that fear of what will happen, what professionally, like you said, and personally. So I'd love to start with, like, what did you do to start, and how did you kind of get yourself out of that, which is totally understandable, that,
Mhm.
feeling bad about it, wallowing it, of course, like that's a
Yeah.
natural response. What did you start to do? How did you start to use coping mechanisms to
Mhm.
move forward? Because it seems like it would be a good excuse to stay stuck there, because that's a big deal.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, but I think fear is whether we call it fear or anxiety or self doubt or uncertainty or discomfort, all of those, they're all kind of the same beast, and it keeps us stuck. It keeps us
Mm-hmm.
playing small. Anxiety keeps us stuck in our comfort zone, and for me, I mean, certainly I was scared. And when I look back on my journey of, well, how did I get to this point of what I would call acceptance? Meaning, in psychology, when we say acceptance, it's sort of it is what it is, and I'm not impacted by it. So kind of indifferent to it. And I think that's where we have to get. If I can't change something, why fight it? Right? It's hard to
Mm-hmm.
get there. So when I look back on my journey, what were the things that I did? So one of them was really, it's challenging fear. Well, and if we even take a step back from that, it's understanding how our minds work. And this is where I love to talk about and teach people that, because we're running around with these biological computers inside our skull, and they're telling us how the world works and what's going to happen and what's going on, and we trust them. But the thing is, what I know as a psychologist is that you cannot believe everything that you think. Our brains, because they have to process so much information so quickly, they take shortcuts. And these shortcuts and kind of the hacks that they use end up with our thinking being distorted. And it tends to be overly negative. So a lot of people have heard of the negativity bias, which is just our brain's tendency to notice the bad over the good. So think about it like if you have a job interview and or a date that you're going on, and you sit there and it's what if I say the wrong thing? What if I mess up? What if I don't get it? What if they don't like me? We don't what if the good stuff, right? What if I go in and it's amazing and I nail this and it's the start of
Mm-hmm.
something awesome? So we're biased toward the negative. So part of that is, I know that we can argue with that. We can challenge that by looking for evidence, right? So for me, there was this deep fear of, what it boiled down to is, if I am blind, I cannot be happy, right? So it was this fear of being miserable. And then I found a study that compared the happiness levels of sighted people with blind people, and there was no difference. And that blew my mind a little bit, because I'm like, how could that be? And I don't know that reading that study would be as impactful for someone who's not the big science nerd that I am, but for me, data speaks to my heart. So I said, okay, cool. There's got to be something to this. And then I started looking for other evidence, right? I'm going to watch a TED talk by a man who is wildly successful by all metrics, and he's also fully blind. So I have a lot more sight still than he does. And I reached out to him, and he was like, "You should read my book," which I did, and it was amazing. And it was really helpful for me to see, wait, here's someone else who's doing it, right? So I had more evidence against those fears, as my mind is like, you can't be independent, you can't be successful, no one will want you. Like racking up the evidence against it. But one of the other things is, talk is really cheap. So we can't always talk our way out of fear and anxiety. It comes from, I think, having courage and starting to put yourself out there and test things out and almost like proving the anxiety wrong. So people know this as facing fears, stretching out of your comfort zone. But as you do that, it starts to really quiet the anxiety. So for me, it was, you can't be independent. Well, I learned how to take the bus and I learned how to use Uber, just started around that time, thank goodness. So I found ways to be independent and that helped. And then I started my own business and it was successful. And so then I've got more evidence to say, wait, you can do this. And I started to be open about my vision. So I had spent years hiding it, hiding it, hiding it. And then I posted publicly about it, kind of my coming out of the disability closet, so to speak. And it sucked. And honestly, I was in like fetal position in the floor sobbing when I hit publish. And I called my mom
Oh,
and she's like, you did the right thing. But then after a few days, that ick sort of calmed down and then people knew about it and still wanted to hang out or still wanted my advice and respected me and valued me. And so all of that started to really quiet that fear. So essentially, I proved it wrong. I also, around
oh,
the same time, started to do new experiences. Like, just that was a New Year's resolution that ended up being the coolest life practice ever. If I could talk everybody into it, I would. But it's every week I seek out a new experience. And in doing that, I didn't know when I started what kind of impact it was going to have, but it stretched my comfort zone. It's boosted confidence. It's boosted comfort with awkward. And frankly, it makes life interesting. And all of that helped to shut down this fear of I'm going to be miserable because I'm not.
hmm. Oh, there's so many things that you said that I want to talk
Yeah.
about. Like so many amazing things. I love talking about that, getting out of your comfort zone. I think it's so
Mhm.
important. It's so scary, but the more you do it, it's like that muscle that just gets stronger and stronger. And I
Yep.
mean, I can talk about something like literally nothing compared to what you've been through, but when I started talking on video a few years ago
Same.
for my business,
Yeah.
I sweat, like I was so stressed out. I could not, I needed a friend to help me through it. It was such a little thing, but it was so scary to me. And
Yeah.
I just started doing it more. And I'm like, now I can just open my camera, do a video. It's like
Hmm.
nothing. And that was something that caused so much fear and anxiety. So I really love that you talk about that, because a lot of times, and you said this as well, it can kind of shut us down, that fear and anxiety. It can just really, this is just too much. I'm going to just sit on the couch because it's safe
Yeah.
there. I'm comfortable there. It's very,
Absolutely.
it's very scary to, get out, and even your experiences, which you did.
Mhm.
I'm going to try something new every week. That's scary too.
Yeah. Well, and that's
And look what you
so
got out of it.
right? Well, and the thing is with anxiety, anxiety is our body's built-in warning system. So it's designed to keep us safe. It's always looking for threat, looking for what could go wrong so that we can stay alive, right? So if you do drive, you're driving down the road and a car pulls out in front of you, your muscles tense and your breath catches and you slam the brakes because anxiety went danger, escape. So it's really adaptive. But what happens anytime we move into something that is unfamiliar or uncertain, it's like our brain doesn't quite know what to expect. So it doesn't know that we're safe. So it starts to throw a fit. It's basically like, whoa, 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 we don't know what's going to happen. Get back in your comfort zone. And I think it's really familiarity zone, and then we feel safe, we feel comfortable. So I like to teach people that, our brains, because they're glitchy and amazing, but they are kind of glitchy, but they're designed to keep us safe and they want to save energy. So that means they want to avoid anything that is scary, uncertain, anything that's hard, or anything that's boring. And so they give us a lot of excuses and a lot of that uncomfortable feeling. And if you don't know, oh, this is just my brain freaking out because I'm stepping out of my comfort zone, we take it as meaningful, right? Like that sweatiness you were talking about. Like if we don't know better, then we say, oh no, this means danger, bad, escape, just like you hit the brakes. So I really think building your courage muscle is one of the most important things that you can do. And whether that's because life throws you a curveball or because you have big goals, right? Just so you know, public speaking is the number one fear. Hopping on a video is really uncomfortable. I remember the first time I did too, same thing. And here we are, right? But it is very much one of those, the more you do it, when your brain learns, oh, okay, this is safe, this is fine, I know what's going to happen. So your comfort zone stretches, it gets bigger. And the other thing is you learn, I can do hard things. It's okay to be
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable. And those are really powerful things to know and to trust that you can
I
handle it.
I love that. I love that. It's like what you said, I wrote it down. You can't believe everything you think, and really
Mm-hmm.
questioning those things that come in and that negativity, and realizing like a lot of times too, the fear of doing something or that feeling of dread or whatever, it's like when it comes into a physical sensation in your body,
Mm-hmm.
you're like, okay, this is probably the worst part of it. I'm going to sweat. I'm going to have a stomach ache or whatever your symptoms are. But
Yeah.
I'm not going to die. I'm not going to,
Mm-hmm.
I'm safe. This is
Mm-hmm.
my brain is on alert because it doesn't think it's safe. And I think, I'd love to get more of your tips and tools for what you said. Like, you can't believe everything you think. How do you distinguish these voices
Mm-hmm.
in our head from like, this is our brain and a thought? It's not true. Or maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's not, maybe we can analyze that to realize we don't need to believe that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a few things, and I wish everybody knew this stuff, right? And this is because it's so helpful to know. It's like an owner's manual for your mind, right? And so I love the way you put it, right? We all have these voices in our head. We have these thoughts, and a lot of times we think it's us, right? Because we think I'm gonna mess up or I'm gonna get hurt. So it sounds like it's coming from us, but it's not. It's your mind, right? And I like to think of it like this, like we have stomachs and they growl, but we don't say I am growling, right? That's weird. We say my stomach is growling. Or our hearts beat and we say, oh, my heart is beating, not I am beating. Well, stomachs growl, hearts beat, minds think. That's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
So I do a lot of separating me from my mind. And I teach my patients that, and the people who read my writing, there's you and there's your mind. And so I will even start to put that, like just those little words in there. My mind is telling me I'm going to blow it. My mind is telling me this is bad. And just starting to do that gives you a little bit of distance, because when you can separate it, all of a sudden then you have a choice. You feed it or you fight it, right? So I kind of think about it like the more you give into it, the stronger it gets, right? It's kind of like a bully, and you got to stand up to the bully, or you got to act like you're not listening to it. So there is this kind of, you can have these thoughts, and just because you're having a thought doesn't mean you have to act on it. So I can say, oh, my mind is telling me that. Oh, that's cute, thanks, no thanks, and go ahead and do something different. And we all do this in some capacity, right? Like if you've ever sat in a meeting and you were thinking, this is the most boring thing, I want to just get up and leave, and you don't, you sit there, right? So I bring that up just to show we don't have to buy everything our mind is selling. But if it does,
Yes.
what we're really telling our brain is, I like this thought, good job, keep giving it to me. So we can label it. I teach people that, like, you can just label it. That's anxiety. If it starts with what if, I don't care what comes after it. What if is a worry, always. What if not? And so I really do this. What if is a worry, and I don't engage it any further. It's like, I kind of think about it almost like if your phone rings and it says potential spam, you don't pick it up, right? Like I don't answer it. Hi, no, thank you. I'm not interested in what you're selling. We just look and go, oh no. And we can do the same thing. If it's a what if, we can just go, oh, that's spam. No thanks. Or self-criticism or negativity. So sometimes just labeling it is really helpful. And then the other thing that I like to teach people is, when it comes to, like you said, analyzing our thoughts, we want to look at two things. Is it true? Meaning you have evidence for it. Now, our brains, because of one of their biases called the confirmation bias, they're going to serve you evidence that says, yeah, look, here's all the proof that supports it. The kicker is you have to look for evidence against it, because that part our brain just conveniently ignores. So you have to go on a mission, right? Where's my evidence against it? So I started looking for evidence that blind people could be happy, and I found it. So we have to look at, is there evidence? But sometimes it's not about right or wrong. It's, is it helpful? And I think that's the more important question. Is this a helpful thought? Does it help me be the kind of person I want to be and live the kind of life I want to live? If it does, great. I'm going to listen to it. If it doesn't, I'm going to look at that like a stomach growl, right? Just because your stomach growls sometimes or does something, we don't always run to the kitchen and make food. Sometimes it's, we ignore it, or it's just anxiety or whatnot. So we don't have to listen to every signal that we get from our brain.
That's so powerful. I love that you talked about, is it true, like questioning our thoughts, because one of my favorite people ever is, I don't know if you've heard of Katie Byron. She is amazing. She has the work that she does with people, and she asks, is it true of a thought? And then the second question is it, do you absolutely know that it's true? Like, let's really look at this. Let's really examine this. And a lot of times people, by the second question, they're like, well, I can see how that there's some holes in this thought. I can't know for sure that this is true. And,
Wow.
even though there might be evidence, yes, at first, like, of course it's true. My husband did something wrong, or someone in my family did something wrong. They are in the wrong and I'm in the right. And then you start to see things a little differently when you question the thought and
Mhm.
what your brain is telling you. And I really think
Mhm.
that is one of the most powerful things we can learn how to do in our entire lives, because this can help with just literally everything that is a
Yeah,
struggle for us.
absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that, and this is something I wish we taught in schools, and that, I think more and more people are talking about this, and, podcasts help and books help and social media helps kind of get the word out there. But this is powerful, because then if we can look at it as you are not your mind is this separate entity, and sometimes it's a frenemy. It feels like it's helpful because, again, it does want to keep you alive, but not happy. Our brains weren't designed to make us happy. They're designed to keep us safe. And
Mm.
there's the sayings and the quotes and the inspiration, like life begins outside your comfort zone, and I agree with that completely. But the only way to do that is to be uncomfortable. It's kind of like if you want to get strong, you go to the gym, you have to lift the weights, right? That's the only way to get stronger. And mentally, it's the same thing. Like, hard things make us tougher and stronger, and that could be hard in a number of different ways. I love talking about this stuff because I think it's just so important.
It is. And I love that I know about it now. I wish I knew about it. Like you said, I wish they taught it in schools. And I'm teaching my
Mhm.
kids this because it's so supportive in mental
Mhm.
health and dealing
Mhm.
with things that come up. And it's the biggest tool, really, for all of
Yeah.
that.
When I first started my wellness journey, I had already been in the skincare industry for years, working on client skin and as an educator for multiple skincare brands. When I learned about how the toxins in our personal care and beauty products could have a negative impact on our health, I knew I needed to make a change. I was used to the result-driven products that I was working with, and I was not happy with the natural products on the market at that time. Although they were safer and cleaner, they did not meet my expectations for results. I created Simply Just Skincare to deliver the results my clients demanded from their products while using natural, toxin-free ingredients. You can check out my clients' results and reviews on my website, simplyjustskincare.com. In 30 days, my clients have reported more hydrated skin, less appearance of fine lines and wrinkles, and more of an overall glow. Our top sellers include our Repair Toner, our Hydrating Undo Serum with hyaluronic acid, and more. I am offering my listeners 20% off their first order with code PODCAST. Check it out in the link in my show notes to get glowing today.
I'd love to talk about, we've talked about a little bit about anxiety, but
Mhm.
everybody wants to be happy. That is like our goal in life. Like we want our kids to be happy. We want to be happy. And I think, going from, we've talked about like being uncomfortable, and yes, it helps us grow, but it's hard and
Uh-huh.
it does cause fear and all of those things. Let's talk more about like the bridge of, getting from that. I have fear about this. I have even like depression, and I have,
Mhm.
all of these hard to cope with emotions, like difficult emotions. How do we get to a place where we're dealing with that, coping with that, and then getting to that place of happiness? And I love what you said about the data. I'm actually the same way. When it comes to something, especially like when it comes to health and fitness, that's
Mhm.
where I'm very passionate about. If I read something and I'm like, okay, this is what harm these products can cause, or whatever, that motivates me when I see the data like that. So
Yeah.
I'm with you when it comes to these things, because I think that can help motivate us to like
Mhm.
make better choices. But I'd love to hear more about the happiness part, because you're
Yeah.
just doing such a great job with that in your own
Yeah,
life.
I also love talking about happiness too, right? I think that's what we all want. We want to be happier. And there's a few things that come to mind. And one is, there is this pervasive myth about happiness, in that it's like it's based on outside circumstances. And, if I get this, then I'll be happy. If I get this relationship, this promotion, if I lose 10 pounds, whatever it is. And when you look to outside sources of happiness, it is always going to be fleeting. And part of that is because, our bodies are designed for what's called homeostasis, which is going back to baseline. So like I went to the gym this morning, my heart rate got up, but it settles back down. So we go back to baseline. This is also on the fear side why facing your fears works, because if you face them, you get really scared and then you habituate or get used to it, right? So we go back to baseline. That happens on the happiness side too. So if you've ever, you went shopping and you were really excited to get something, that fades really quick, right? Because we go back to baseline. And it's a brilliant design from Mother Nature, because if we weren't, if you could just get something, you're like, oh, I'm happy forever, then we lose motivation, right? So the other thing, people are often surprised by this statistic, but when I speak and I'll ask audiences, like, how much of your happiness, 0 to 100%, is based on external circumstances? And you usually get, 80%, 90%, 50%. Sometimes people are savvy and they'll say like 30%. It's actually 10% of your happiness is attributable to the external circumstances. Now, to be fair, 50% seems to be kind of genetic, like your sort of set point happiness, but that means 40% is more about your mindset and the way you approach things. So I like to really start to challenge this idea that happiness comes from the outside, and it's more, because it's not. And so with that, then looking at it, we also have to kind of change the way we understand happiness. My master's thesis research was happiness and optimism and anxiety and depression. And I bring this up because when you're getting ready to design a study, the first thing you have to do is define what it is you're studying. And I remember talking through it with a couple of friends. I was like, oh, I'm going to measure happiness. They're like, well, what is happiness? I'm like, oh, happiness, right? Like we all know it, but putting it into words is hard. So that's put me on this journey of like, okay, well, what is happiness? And a lot of times we conflate it or confuse it with pleasure or peace or this kind of fleeting feeling that means I like this. And I think we need to look at happiness as more of the side effect of living life well, more of a satisfaction and a contentment. Like I was not happy in the weeks where I wrote my dissertation. Like I didn't enjoy that. Was it worth it? Absolutely. Because it got me where I am. Is facing a fear fun? No, but it got me where I want to go. So we have to really, I think, reconfigure how we think about happiness and not chase it directly, and instead focus on, how do I be brave? How do I quiet those unhelpful voices or kind of break free from them? How do I forge really strong relationships? Quality relationships are one of the biggest predictors of life satisfaction and happiness. How do I engage? Right? So being fully engaged, people know this as being in the zone or a state of flow. That's important. So there's all of these different components that we can start to build and incorporate into our life. And I really think if you do those, happiness is the natural outcome. But it's different than saying, oh, I'm going to find this thing that makes me pleasurable or that is pleasant and enjoyable in this moment.
That's such a good point about the circumstances, because if that was true, that things made us happy and our circumstances made us happy, then all of the wealthy people would be just amazingly happy and balanced, and and then there's also people who have nothing, who find so much joy, have so much peace, have so much happiness. So it just shows you again like how powerful our minds are and how they work, and how we can I feel like it's very empowering. We don't have to be 20 pounds thinner to be happy now. And it's like a very, I'll be happy then is such a setup for failure, because then you'll get there and there's still going to be things you're not happy about.
Bingo, right? Then it's like you're chasing this always kind of thing. And I think we do need to strive and look toward the future, but there's an art or a practice to being content in the moment. This is where you see, people talk about a gratitude practice. And I know a lot of people who roll their eyes at it, but the science behind it is solid. And what you're doing there is training your brain against the natural negativity bias. So it like balances your thinking. So it's a wonderful practice to start to do. What can I be grateful for in this moment? What can I appreciate in this moment? And side note, people will tell me, nothing, this sucks. I'm like, okay, yeah, it does. I'm not in the business of denying reality. I'm not going to say this is awesome. Like, I'm not like, woohoo, I love that I'm losing my vision. Like, no, it sucks. And there are positives. And I love to tell the story of a woman named Gerda Weissman Klein. And I heard her as a podcast interview with my co-founder at Peak Mind, April. And they were doing this interview, and Gerda survived the Holocaust in the concentration camp. And this woman said, no one talks about the good parts of the concentration camps. And I was, what? There were good parts? And she talked about compassion and caring and shared these really, touching stories of generosity among other survivors. And I took that as, well, if Gerda can find something, a bright spot in the midst of this horrible human atrocity, then no matter what's going on in my life, I can find a bright spot if I make my brain look for it.
Oh, I have chills.
I
That's so
know.
beautiful.
I always get chills when I think about that too.
It's so beautiful. So share with us, like you said in the moment you can think of like, what am I grateful for? But like if somebody's never had a gratitude practice, what would you recommend like practically like for them to how to start?
Yeah.
Because
There's
that
a
sounds
couple ways to
powerful.
do it. Yeah, it really is. It's one of the things that I think can make a real difference, right? In changing your default programming in your mind. And it does take practice. Like changing your brain is much more like going to the gym than learning a new concept at school, right? Because it's not a light bulb moment. It is repetition and practice, like building a muscle. So with gratitude, I think you could either do it as a daily practice. So every night before bed or every morning when you start your day or around the dinner table with your family, you can do the what went well. That's it. Like what went well. I really like this exercise called a 3-2-1 that I got from a friend of mine, Caroline Danda. She's a psychologist as well. And it's three things that were good about today, two things I'm looking forward to tomorrow, and one good thing about myself. So we're hitting gratitude on a couple different levels. And it's not about, I don't want BS, right? So it's really make your brain come up with something. And if you're really stuck or if you're depressed, it's hard. So it might take 10, 20 minutes to do a 3-2-1. That's making your brain work out for 10, 20 minutes. That's awesome. So I love the 3-2-1. But then there's also in the moment gratitude, right? So like if you were feeling anxious or you were feeling sad or you were feeling angry, if you can tap into gratitude, it's kind of a competing response. It's hard to put your brain in a grateful state and also be in an anxious state or a sad or a mad state. So with that, you can do the find something in this moment to appreciate and to be grateful for. I sometimes will call that flip it. Like let's flip it from like a negative to a positive. Like, oh man, it's raining and I can't go outside and play today. We'll flip it. Okay, well, at least it'll give me a chance to curl up with my book. So it's kind of that but at least piece. And so that's one of my other favorite ways to do this is like just find the bright side.
I love the 3-2-1 practice. I'm going to do that with my family. I think that's amazing. I think it's really important to practice this, like you said, because sometimes, like you said, yeah, I am dealing with my eye issue and I'm not going to have toxic positivity and say, it's great. I'm so glad I have this. But you can say, and, this is what's going well in my life, or these are the things that I'm grateful for. And this is what positive has come out of a negative, because a lot of times, and I think most people would agree with this, out of some of the most challenging things that we've dealt with in our life, we've come out of it sometimes with some real benefits. And some of the hardest things that I've been through, so something that I had to deal with my family like 10 years ago, I could literally say it was the hardest thing I had ever done. Mm-hmm. And the pride I have for getting through it and the things that I learned, like I don't want to do it again, but right. I did get a lot out of it that made my life better.
Yeah. No one really talks about post-traumatic growth. And we talk about post-traumatic stress and like the negative effects of going through something hard, and whatever adversity that is. I mean, one, we're all going to go through something hard. No one gets through life without a challenge. And two, post-traumatic growth is a real thing. We see that just as frequently as in mental health as we do post-traumatic stress, but we don't talk about it. And it's everything that you just said. We go through and it makes us stronger. I think of it as, steel is forged in fire, or every hero story ever. Think about Harry Potter or Katniss Everdeen in the Hunger Games, or Luke Skywalker, whatever hero, fictional or in real life, goes through something hard. And that's part of what helps them build their strengths. So I think that's really important to even keep in mind sometimes when you're going through a hard time, because we get really impatient. Like, it sucks right now and it's always going to suck. But I sometimes will think about future Ashley, right? Well, she's going to get through this and look back on this. And what do I want to do to feel good about it? What would make me, like you said, feel proud about getting through something hard? And that's helpful, I think, to be able to tolerate or thrive or get through something that is hard. Is at some point, if you can zoom out enough, this is going to be not that bad.
I love that. Oh, what are some other things that we could do when we're kind of in the thick of it? I feel like this work and the things that you've talked about today are essential. Like, if you can, and I can see how people are like, I'm not doing that, or like, I'm stuck because your brain can really take over and it can feel so desperate and so much despair. So what else can we do, like, to sort of cope through these times?
Yeah. I think one of the best things that we can do besides a gratitude practice is a mindfulness practice. And that's a big buzzword right now. And I know everybody is kind of hopping on the bandwagon. And if you're already there, great. And, for people listening who are rolling their eyes, same. As a psychologist, I was really resistant to it because I didn't understand it. I thought it meant meditating and making your mind go blank. And I was like, BS, minds don't go blank. They don't stop, right? They're thought generating machines. They're going to continuously think. So for me, it was really, one, it was getting into the data. The data behind mindfulness is amazing. Every positive outcome you could want physically or mentally, even socially, mindfulness will help with, right? There, it's just across the board. It's the equivalent, like you exercise your body to keep it healthy. Mindfulness is the same, the equivalent for your brain. But mindfulness is really paying attention to the present moment. So when we're caught up in our head, right? Like, we get lost in our thoughts and we're thinking ahead to the future, or we're thinking about stuff that happened in the past, we are not present. So mindfulness is paying attention to the present. Now, sometimes the present moment is really hard or really uncomfortable. And this is where we can choose what part of the present moment that we're paying attention to, and doing it without judgment. So this is, if we go back to when we were talking earlier about those physical signals that kick in, right? Like, if you're sweaty or your stomach is flipping, there's a difference between, oh my gosh, this is awful, I can't handle this, this feels so bad, versus my heart is pounding, right? That's so much more neutral. And so when we can take the judgment out of it and focus on, I like to call it just the facts, like, what are the facts of the present moment? That can take out so much unnecessary kind of extra stuff. There's this saying, I stole it from a meme on Facebook years ago, and it was, just because life gives you a cactus doesn't mean you have to sit on it. And when we're taking the stuff that happened and we're adding all of this judgment and what it means and these expectations and predictions, we're in our head in the future, we're sitting on the cactus. So I like to come back, what's real right now? What are just the facts?
That is huge. That is so powerful. I love that. It's like, it takes away the drama of it. And it just, like you said, it clears out the facts. This is just what the circumstance is. And then you can stop your brain from making it mean a bunch of things. And I love talking about that too, because it's like, we have a thought and then we make it mean something. And that can cause a lot of pain in our bodies. So
Absolutely.
It's like, kind of being able to break that down. This is the circumstance. These are the facts, like you said. And then, what do I want to make this mean, so that I take the drama away from it, and I don't make I feel like we can make ourselves so much more miserable. It's like, there could be a situation that we're not enjoying, or there could be some type of crisis that we're dealing with. And then you have that's a bummer. But then you add on, like you said, the judgment. And now we're really in trouble. Now we're really suffering. It's like, that's
Absolutely.
even harder to get out of.
Yeah. Well, and I like the word that you use there, right? It's suffering. I think it's an old Buddhist teaching, but it's pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Pain is going to happen.
I love that.
It just is, right? But suffering is when we're sitting on the cactus and we're making it worse. And we don't have to, but it does take work. And that's where a lot of people are like, oh, I tried, it doesn't work. I try to focus on the bright side. And I'm like, okay, cool. But that's doing one push-up and expecting to all of a sudden be stronger. It is repetition, consistency, training. But I think when we train
Yeah.
our brain, at Peak Mind, which is my company, we like to say your mind can be your most valuable asset or your biggest liability, and you get to choose.
That is so empowering too.
Mhm,
Like when you look
mhm,
at it like that, and it's so important what you said too is we have to remember this takes practice,
mhm,
and whether you set aside some time, I think, and I did step away from this a little bit this summer. My kids are home. I
mhm,
talked about this on my podcast a few weeks ago. I've been in a little bit of a rut. I haven't been doing my morning routine, and wow, I can feel it. It's
yeah,
like getting back into it. I'm like, oh, it just feels like a little bit of pressure
mhm,
has been taken off my shoulders, and
mhm,
I feel like more balanced, and it's literally not even that much time that I'm taking, but I do it in the morning. And I think it's good to have a time or space where you can take, some practice and
mhm,
analyze your thoughts, write down your thoughts and what's going on in your brain, and look at them on
mhm.
paper. It can be scary,
Yeah,
but it's
but
good
it's
to
also
look at it. And
yeah, it's important though, right? Especially if you can look at it and one that gives you some distance from it to say, wait, this is just a thought. And then you do
right.
get to analyze, is this helpful? Is this what I want to keep listening to and acting on or not?
Yeah, and what could I do instead? Like I love
Mhm,
trying to think of something. What other thoughts could I what could I make this mean? What do I want this to mean? And
mhm.
how can I work on it that way? I think that's so helpful as well. Are there
Absolutely.
any other tips that you want to I could talk to you all day. I feel like this has been so amazing, but I want to hear about where people can find you next. But is there
Mhm.
any other things on this topic? We're going to have you back because there's way more I want to talk about. But
Yeah,
as far as
I
this thought work goes, like what else can you share with us?
yeah, I think there are tons and tons and tons of techniques. So if you're really interested in this, you can Google things like thought challenging, diffusion. It's DEFUSION, and these are just psychological terms to get like techniques for this. Anything on mindset, like growth mindset versus fixed mindset, but it really is we get to cultivate. We can cultivate our brains. Like we can train them and we can shift them. And it doesn't mean that we never have negative thoughts. I mean, I've been practicing this stuff for decades now, and still the thoughts will creep in, and I don't always catch them because I'm human. But being able to really have that awareness, like mindfulness helps you be aware in real time. Here's what my mind's doing. And when we have that separation from it, we can kind of see it. It's like, oh, look at how it's working. Almost like getting to like your best friend, right? You know, their quirks and their responses. And so we can kind of do that too. But I think it is worth doing the work. I really do, because it makes a huge difference on your life experience. Because again, it's not necessarily about what happens to you, it's how you respond to what happens to you. And that makes a really big difference. The other thing, I just published a book in May, so it's brand new. The Way I See It, A Psychologist's Guide to a Happier Life. And it is little short chapters. So it's designed to be that you can just pick it up, read for a few minutes, put it down. But we've got a section in there where we're talking more about minds and training your mind and how they work and thinking. And then there's a section on emotions and dealing with difficult emotions like anxiety or regret or disappointment and shame. There's a section on relationships because those are so important on doing hard things and really building that mental toughness, and then kind of figuring out who you are and what you want to stand for in life, and then some lessons on happiness. And so I like to think that's a good resource too. So
I'm definitely getting your book. This sounds perfect. I'll link the book and everything else
awesome.
in the show notes. What was the name of the book of the gentleman who did the talk that you
Yeah,
loved?
his name is Isaac Lidsky. In the book, oh shoot, Eyes Wide Open, Eyes Wide Shut. No, one of those is a movie. One of those is a book.
Maybe open. I don't know. I'll
Yeah.
check and
Okay.
I'll make sure that I find the right one, and I'll link that too
Yeah.
for anyone who's interested. So tell us
Yeah.
where we can find you and more about your business that you have.
Yeah. In terms of social media, I'm most active on LinkedIn. So it's
Okay.
backslash uh, Dr. Ashley Smith. I do have a website, which is drashleysmith.com. And that's linked. My book is there. My TEDx talk is there. Newsletter you can sign up for. I send out a monthly newsletter. And then my company is Peak Mind, the Center for Psychological Strength, and we design and deliver mental health and wellbeing trainings to organizations. So basically, it's driven by this desire to take everything that myself and Dr. April, my partner, she's also a psychologist, it's everything that we know from psychology, but we want it out and accessible, because I think the more people know, the better life experience they have. And it's not just, better experience and being happier, but also performing at a higher level. And so our mission is to really take the tools that we have and share them widely. And that's at peakmindpsychology.com.
I'll link all of this in the show notes so it's easy for everybody to find. I love your tips. Yes, you do therapy and you're a therapist, but you have so many tools too. And I feel like sometimes you don't get that with therapy. It's great and I love it. I'm a big fan. But what you do is, I feel like, really concrete ways that we can make change. Like, that's the goal, and to move forward. So I love talking to you. I really appreciate you coming on today.
Absolutely. This was so much fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Please subscribe and review so we can reach more people who want to learn to glow alongside us. See you next time.